Hi, myself Javed Ali, and this is my first demo video on Introduction to Spring Framework. In the earlier days, when we built applications like web applications, Android applications, and many more types of applications, we go through the Java language where we can build with many lines of code, boiler codes, and uses of many classes and methods to build our applications. But nowadays, since a long time, we using Spring framework where we can build web applications with the help of Spring Boot, where within a few steps we can build a web applications. So let's understand about what is Spring framework. So Spring framework is an open source framework used to build web applications with the help of Spring Boot. It is easy to use. It also contains it also contains many sub frameworks like aspect oriented programming, object relational mapping, Java database connectivity, Spring MVC, model view controller, and many more. With the help of these sub frameworks, we can build Spring Boot application with the help of Spring framework. Spring framework is also known as dependency injection framework. It is also known as dependency framework. So basically dependency frameworks, it helps to auto-wire our configuration by injecting properties through constructor, maybe setters, maybe using fields. So before going on more discussion about Spring, let's first understand how Spring works with Spring Web. So let's open here, talk about Spring MVC. Spring MVC, its full form model view controllers. We have client at the front end, and at the back end we have Spring applications. So how they connect with each others and how they communicate. And let's assume also there is a database where we are creating tables and column. This is our client side, maybe web browsers. Front end can be built through React, Angular, and many user interfaces. How they will communicate? So firstly, client, from the client side, a request is sent it to the backside of our application, generally known as backend side. Here for our project or understanding, let's assume Spring Boot side, means we constructing our server with the help of Spring Boot. So here Here user will request from client side to the backend, and from backend it will respond from backside to the client side. Response back to the client side. We have three things. First, controllers, where all the requests it's handled through the controller. And this is our service classes, where we applied business logics. And this is repository, where it will interact with the database. Database, it can be MySQL or a MongoDB, and many more. It may be a it may be NoSQL and SQL based languages. So here is a controller controllers, which accepts request and generate a response, maybe in the form of JSON, HTML pages, and many more. So this is our controller, where it accepts the request and a response back to the client side. And this is our services classes, where all methods and business logic is applied in. And we having a repository interfaces. It having a many classes, where it provide a business logic to apply it properly, and with the help of controllers we can apply the methods and classes to respond back to the client side. So how this MVC works? So it is very useful when we build web applications. Let's dive more into a Spring. Let's focus on its other modules. Let's go to Google and write Spring Framework modules. Here we can see on images. These are the modules of Spring Framework. Let's talk more about these modules. First, a core container. Let's talk about core container, where it contains bean, core, context, expression language. Bean is basically a object for a class we can create, where core also provide interfaces which help to build web applications. So bean and core, so with the help of bean and core, there is an interface, bean factory, which help to inject all the dependencies with the help of IOC container. So this is a fundamental logic. So let's write few things. Fundamental about Spring So it contains IOC container, and this can be IOC container. This can be managed or can extract the functionality with the help with the with the help of Bean factory interfaces, where we can obviously apply their classes and methods to develop our applications. And IOC container inversion of control helps to manage dependency management. So IOC container also manage our dependencies when we create our bean, and how to interact with between many beans. IOC container will take care of it. So let's talk about context. So let's talk about context, where it is a sum of beans and core. It will give all both facilities of beans and core. And context uses the interface like application context, which provide features of IOC container we already discussed. And last fourth module fourth module of core container expression language, where it can print dynamic values coming from the client side, and maybe we can use the dollar sign to write a Java code. So expression language helps to print dynamic values of property in our application. So let's talk about dependency injection. We have three ways to inject dependencies. So firstly, constructor based dependency injection. Second, setter based dependency injection. And last, field based dependency injections. So we can see within our code of a few lines of Spring. So if we want to explore more about Spring, so this is official website of Spring, where we can see about Spring Boot, and Spring Cloud, which used to build microservices. And most importantly, let's see, we can build microservices, reactive based applications, cloud, web applications, serverless, event driven, batch processing applications, and many more. Here we can see also interesting, we can read about Spring, and mostly important, why we should use the Spring. So now one question also comes into mind, why to use Spring framework. Obviously it is very within a few steps, easy to use. So it provides flexibility, maintenance, removes unwanted codes or maybe boiler code, provide better security with the help of Spring security, and many more benefits of Spring framework to develop our web application. So before going more deep about Spring and Spring Boot, we already discussed our core technology. Going back to other modules like data integrity, where we can interact with our backend side, we already seen in our diagram here. Repository, it provides methods and classes to deal with databases at the backend, and it stores the data which is coming from a client side. So let's talk about Spring Boot. Spring Boot. Let's talk about Spring Boot. Here we can see what is Spring Boot. So it is a standalone application we can create within a few steps. It already contains embedded Tomcat and many other server. It automatically configure Spring and third-party libraries, means it will automatically inject our dependencies and reduces the boiler code. And we can go configuration. So here comes configuration. Let's talk about configuration. How we can configure our Spring Boot application. It can be XML based configuration, annotation based configuration, and lastly Java based configuration. We will see in our further, and we will understand our configurations. Let it's a overview. So this is Spring Boot, where we can build RESTful web services, and let's see how to build a Spring Boot application in a few steps. So here we will type Spring initializer to build web application. So within a few steps we can choose a language. Let's, in our case, it's Java, and this is project management, where Maven will help to manage our project or applications. And here we choose Spring Boot version, and here group, where it is also known as package. So our package is demo 1 for our video, and Spring demo video. We can give a name and name and artifact ID will be the same. Let's write something in descriptions. So this is my first video demo on Spring and Spring Boot applications, and we can see the package. Our package look like com.demo1. It is sufficient. And now packaging, we can use two types of packing, war and jar, but in our case I am using jar. And this is a Java version, which Java version is installed in our system, so it is 21. So we talking more about dependencies. So how dependencies look like. So we are using web to build a RESTful web services, and already we having it Apache Tomcat. So let's click on generate, and we can explore also. This is our projects look like, where pom.xml, this is a configuration and important XML file, where we can see our Java version 21 about Spring. This is dependency, Spring web dependency, and few test dependency. Here just one click, our Spring demo is installed, and from here we can extract our file, and we can see the folder where our folder will be located. So extract, so let's see. So this is our code look like, where pom src main java and demo, where this is a main class of Spring. Let's copy this URL, and Intel any IDE. Here I am using Intel IJ, and also I will use Visual Code for further videos or modules to understand. So here ID plays a very important role to build our application. How Spring Boot is working. Let's see our demo, and open in our Intel IJ, and this side is Maven, where it managing our project, and how our code and this project look likes. We were discussing about pom XML, where all the dependencies are putting here, and we can see our Java version, Spring Boot, starter web application, and as per required we can add here. So in our case, let's see again this diagram, where this is a controller and client side. So we are building here only controller which will accept the request from the client side and generate a response. And let's write our first controller here. This is main application where we will run our application. So let's create a first controller. This is our package controller, and we are creating maths controller for doing operations plus minus and multiply and divide. So this how looks. So this is our package controller, and we have a maths controller. To build it a controller, we had to put in import REST controller, where SpringBoot providing REST controller, and our package will be the imported at, at the top of our maths controller. And another annotations, request mapping. Request mapping we will learn about in a further video. We have a controller handler controller which is handled by the handlers. So let's create a first for addition, public, return type int, add calculation, where we having two types, number one, and another number two, and to make it a handler for a controller, we have to give a annotation, get mapping. So when we want addition, we can use this handler for calculating our addition calculation. And similarly we can create multiplication, subtraction, multiplication and divide. So when we put our URL slash, let's understand on later, when we type URL and further we slash add for addition, and when we let's create first a first handler for addition. Before, let's configure other also. This is for subtraction, multiplication, and this is for division. So let's type for a URL, when we type slash subtraction, so this handler will act. And when we type slash for multiply, this method will run. And we went and last div. So here it accept number 1 and number 2 for every method. So how it will return? So it will return int int value, return int value, let's say sum. So let's sum will be number 1, number 2, and it will return the sum of two number. When we talk about subtractions, let's int subtract, or we can say difference. So number 1, number 2, and return or, and let's last 2 for multiply. Let's say int product of two number, number 1, sorry, here a mistake, minus number 2, and for division, for this is our answer. So say number 1, number 2, here we will return our int value, and here we will return division. So this is our constructor where we can build services, and where we can apply business logics, and also stores our number in the database. But in this video we are just creating our first controller, and let's check how it works. Let's, for the front end, we were seeing here. So in for this video we are using Postman. Let's see Postman and open. After making the change on main URL, let's and slash to perform addition, and here we have to send after sending there is an internal server. And before to handle how we can handle this error, here we have to accept and use the annotation request param, and same for another request param, and similarly for others. Let's rewrite. For a multiplication, let's make changes. Basically we are using res param, where from front end number 1 and number 2 will come, and accepting through a handlers. Let's rerun our applications once again. And now adding param number 1, 10, number 2, let's 25, and let's perform the operation. Here we got the answer 35 as our output. Let's check for subtraction. Here we got minus 15. Let's put a greater value here. Let's send request, and we got 25, our right answer. Let's perform for multiplication. We having slash mul for multiplication. Slash mul, and here we got our answer. And for divide, slash div, firing our URL from Postman or maybe other front end side where we can interact with our client. So we got answer 2. So our all handlers are running properly, and this how handler works. For further, we can create business logic and databases for our data integration that will directly connect with the databases to store our data. So that's Spring Boot applications for our example, and we can test our application with the help of testing through unit testing and integration testing. We have seen in the test here test module and web and data integration we can update here. Other sub modules may be testing, it may be unit testing for Java, JUnit test. So these are the sub modules which help to run our application perfectly using Spring Boot framework. That's the end of the video.